This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
And a very good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. Carol Massar, Tim Stenivek, live here at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City. First trading day of November. We've got stocks, a little bit of a mixed trade, but we are definitely off our worst levels of the session, certainly on the S&P and the NASDAQ 100. On a day, too, when we've seen yields bouncing around, too, but they are off their lows of the session. Got a lot going on, a lot of it coming out of D.C. here.
Yeah, we do. We're going to have the details from Charlie Pellet in just a minute. And speaking out of D.C., Carol, a little bit later, we're going to be checking in with Joe Mathieu, who's in New York City. Some special election day coverage coming up tomorrow on the Bloomberg Network. Handful of governors' races that are very closely watched, and of course, what's happening here in New York City as well.
Yeah, so much going on. A big race in my own home state in terms of governor. We're going to get to that, but we're also going to talk about Amazon because that share price is surging ahead on this Monday. Wall Street raising its price targets, a lot of them on this company. This is following earnings that we got last week, and then you got the company inking this massive deal, $38 billion with OpenAI. There's an Nvidia component. I just feel like I don't know. It's like the family's all together for Thanksgiving and they're doing deals with one another. That's what it feels like.
Well, we're going to be getting to the bottom of that and more throughout the hour. Also, the toy maker that's challenging President Trump's tariffs at the Supreme Court. That coming up in just a few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. And also what stood out in the president's lengthy interview last night on 60 Minutes. And then eVTOLs. Like Tim and I are flying, right?
Yeah, but not in those.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, not in those. Yeah.
Not in those. We're going to get the reality. We're going to check in with one of the players in that field. But first up, let's get a check on your trading day. Here is Charlie Pellet.
All right, thank you very much. Happy Monday. Happy November to you both. We have got stocks trading mixed, as you mentioned, with the Dow now down 196, a drop there of 0.4%. All about big tech today. S&P up 16, gain there of 0.2%. NASDAQ up 0.6%. But look at the Mag 7 index surging now by 1.4%. Your 10-year 4.10%, with the 2-year 3.60%. Gold a little changed, up under 0.1%, holding right around $4,000 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.2%, 60.82 a barrel on WTI, and a retreat for Bitcoin back below $107,000, 106,854 on Bitcoin, down now by 2.9%. Coming up after the close of trading, we will be hearing from Palantir, stock ahead of earnings, up now by about 3.4%. Amazon Web Services has signed a $38 billion deal to supply OpenAI with computing power, providing access to hundreds of thousands of Nvidia graphics processing units. We'll have a whole lot more with our Mandeep Singh coming up in just a moment. Nvidia shares up 3.3%. Amazon, meanwhile, up another 4.4%. And Microsoft has signed a roughly $9.7 billion deal to buy AI computing capacity from Iron, becoming the Australian company's largest customer. Recapping stocks higher, S&P up 13, up 0.2%. And for on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. And we do want to mention a story just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. This has to do with Fed Governor Lisa Cook. These are prepared remarks for a Brookings institution event in Washington. And she says that she sees the risk of further labor market weakness as greater than the risk of inflation, or that inflation will pick up. And she expects inflation to remain elevated for the next year due to the effects of President Trump's tariffs, but says it should recede toward the Fed's 2% target once tariff effects fade. So again, we're hearing from Fed speakers following that decision last week.
Yeah, should note too, this event for Lisa Cook, it's the first public speech since President Trump moved back in August to fire her from the Fed's Board of Governors over mortgage fraud allegations in her ensuing lawsuit to block her removal. That case has made its way to the Supreme Court. It'll hear arguments in January. The justice is rejecting President Trump's request to immediately remove her while it proceeds.
All right, that's definitely top of mind. So too are shares of Amazon. They're up about 4.4%, jumping as Wall Street raises price targets on the stock following last week's earnings. Remember that one. Certainly one of the standouts between the Mag 7 companies. Also, we got a story. Amazon's cloud unit has signed a $38 billion deal to supply a slice of OpenAI's bottomless demand for computing power. There is a lot going on because it involves Amazon, it involves OpenAI, it involves Nvidia. So we're like, bubble, no bubble, the AI spend, I mean, it just continues to.
Well, lots of questions that we have. Once again, we lean on Bloomberg Intelligence Global Head of Technology, Mandeep Singh, who's just back from a global whirlwind trip. Quite a few countries that you went to in a very few number of days. We'll get to that in just a minute. First, explain this deal for us, because there are some names in here that, certainly household names, but also complicated relationships that these companies already have, not necessarily with each other.
Yeah, I mean, look, the ecosystem that we had so far, Microsoft, OpenAI, and, Google partnering with Anthropic and Amazon partnering with Anthropic, that seems to be changing right here. And you saw Microsoft adopting Anthropic. And,
Microsoft, a big owner of OpenAI,
actually incorporating Anthropic in their Office 365 suite. And now we also know Oracle has this $300 billion deal with OpenAI. So it doesn't surprise me that, Amazon and OpenAI are partnering, because OpenAI has the best models. But when you look at their token consumption, Google's token consumption is higher. So they are looking for more capacity through all the different avenues they can.
Why does OpenAI need Amazon when Nvidia capacity, when Nvidia is an investor in OpenAI?
Because OpenAI cannot use Nvidia directly. It needs a cloud provider. You fine-tune the LLMs on enterprise data. Where does the enterprise data reside? It resides in the 3 cloud providers with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And we know.
But why not use Azure from Microsoft?
Because Azure doesn't have as much capacity, and now Azure is also using, as I said, Microsoft is using Anthropic.
Okay.
Google is also signed a multi-year deal.
Frenemies, Carol.
I never feel so stupid when we're talking about this stuff. So help me understand, because it does feel like this increasingly tangled web, but it may not feel that way to you. And I'm just, all I see is money, 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 spend, spend, spend. And I keep thinking about ROI, return on investment. We have talked with you, especially with the hyperscalers, that we do see that ROI.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. Is it still continuing? What about, I don't know, is there so much more growth to come? And those data centers, are all of them maxed out, and that's why we need to continue building?
Yes, and I'll frame it this way. This earnings season, we learned that Microsoft's $93 billion Azure business grew 39%, and they were capacity constrained. They said they would have grown over 40%.
That's crazy, right?
So just think about how much AI has added to that Azure growth. It's close to 20%. Cloud growth rate is 20%. That's what you see from Amazon number, is $130 billion business growing at 20%. Why is Azure growing 39%? Because of that 19 to 20% incremental AI growth that they are getting from AI.
But could it be, Mandeep, that we're seeing growth now, and then all of a sudden people are going to be like, I don't know that I'm actually going to I'm going to get the payoff from this ongoing longer term. Could that possibly play out?
I mean, the 2 metrics I remind investors of is, one is the infrastructure growth that we have seen for hyperscale cloud guys, and the other one is token consumption. If people are using AI, that will get reflected in token consumption. And tokens is nothing but your use of AI, whether it's in a coding agent, customer service use case. And so that is a metric to keep an eye on.
But we've talked with you that at some point people are going to have to pay for this stuff, right? And that maybe we won't use it as much as we might be right now using it for, give me a picture of a horse or tell me what to do with the stuff in my fridge. Because there is a cost to this.
Yes, and which is why we use a subscription model for pretty much all of this. None of it is an ad-driven model. Why? Because traditionally Google search was inexpensive when it comes to rolling out to users, and then you could show an ad and make up. The business model for AI is very different.
Right.
It requires a lot more compute, and you can only monetize it best using a subscription model, which is what we see in a lot of these products.
So we're all going to be paying subscription for this. Everybody, businesses, going forward forever.
Even consumers.
Even consumers.
ChatGPT subscriptions, they cost up to $200 per month. So there is no free lunch here.
Go. I could talk an hour on
you were
this.
just back from
Yes.
3 countries in 6 days. We only have a minute left. Where'd you go? What'd you learn?
Well, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tokyo, and all 3 are excited about AI. The nuance is in how they are looking at AI deployments. In the case of Hong Kong and China, AI optimizations, compute optimizations are front and center. They want to use open source. They want cheapest form of AI. That's where, Singapore and Tokyo are more, using Western LLMs. And look, everyone is excited about finding out what the use cases are. They want to build local data centers for having that AI capacity. And this build out is global. I mean, it's definitely something that we are seeing across the board with all countries.
That Blackwell chip, Nvidia, are they expecting that they're going to have access to it at some point?
I think everyone wants allocation. In the case of certain countries, the sovereign part is not that clear yet.
Okay.
But Singapore government, for example, is very advanced. So in their case, you could see them being front and center when it comes to deploying their own AI.
So the AI global spend, it's on?
It's on. It certainly is on.
Man, right? Okay. Thank you for being back here in New York, because we've been waiting for you. Mandeep Singh, Global Head of Technology Research at Bloomberg Intelligence, right here in our studio. Tim.
Well, AI and its necessary data centers, as we know, we talk about it all the time. It is and will consume lots of energy globally. And that, Carol, takes us to Brazil.
It does indeed, where the UN's climate change conference is happening. Along with that, Bloomberg is bringing together top leaders from business, finance, policy, academia, and NGOs for candid discussions in Rio and Sao Paulo. They are focused on creating solutions to support the goals, Tim, set forth at COP30.
Right now, we head to Rio de Janeiro and COP30, Bloomberg Philanthropies. It's a gathering of hundreds of mayors, governors, and subnational leaders to spotlight local climate solutions and to demonstrate how cities, states, and regions are accelerating progress on global climate goals. There we find David Gura. He's the Bloomberg News correspondent and host of the Bloomberg Big Take podcast. David, good to see you this afternoon. The global backdrop when it comes to climate issues, how the U.S. fits in or how it doesn't fit in right now. What's that conversation?
Well, that conversation is certainly shaping what's happening on the ground here. So we had Donald Trump, the president of the United States, at the UN General Assembly calling climate change a scam and really clearly drawing that line in the sand. And everyone here is aware of that. And by him doing that, it's kind of changed the way that everybody here talks about climate and understands everyone's responsibility. So you mentioned that there are mayors and governors here, not just from the U.S., but all over the world. There is this emphasis on what can be done, Tim, at the local level, absent engagement of national leaders here in the U.S. and elsewhere to fight climate change. And that's sort of where things stand right now, not waiting for the U.S. to come back into the fold, but plotting a course forward. This isn't being treated as something like a momentary blip. It's really trying to figure out a way here to fight climate change, absent leadership from the federal government in the U.S., Tim.
Hey, listen, you are having lots of conversations, obviously, that connected with global climate issues, but it's not the only thing, because you have leaders from all over the world, all over the United States, including a couple of governors that you caught up. Tell us about that conversation.
Yeah, I spoke with the governors of Wisconsin and New Mexico earlier today, and they've been very actively involved in making climate change a state issue. So the first was the governor of Wisconsin, who has really made this a signature marquee part of his tenure as governor of Wisconsin. And he talked about how much power governors have to fight climate change at the state level, how much power they have generally. We talked about a host of other issues that he feels like the federal government isn't dealing with, that he and other governors are able to make positive inroads on. Same with Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham of New Mexico when it comes to food stamps, when it comes to universal child care, which is now in place in New Mexico. It's been in place now for a couple of days. Again, the overarching ethos here, we talk about in the context of climate, but it has to do with other policy perspectives as well, is you can't just wait for the federal government to do something, particularly, guys, at this moment when the federal government is shut down. States do have a lot of power on their own and together. Something that both of them told me during the course of our interview was they're very powerful if they all work together. They, too, are Democratic governors, but they say they work with Republican governors on water issues in the case of Governor Lujan Grisham of New Mexico out west. They have to do it. They're finding ways to work together. So it's a sense like one train might be stopped, but another train is moving on, and they're figuring out how to gain more speed and do more on their own.
Yeah, governors can be very nimble when they have to be. Let's hear more from that conversation that David had earlier.
Mr. President, open your heart, open your mind. He's required to do it. He should have done it earlier because the federal government has done this before in the circumstances. So the fact that they haven't taken that opportunity like they have in the past, frankly, I think that's criminal. Second of all, now we have Carson that said, Mr. President, you have to do this. We have to. We don't have the money in Wisconsin to do it for more than a couple of days, frankly. And so it's their program. The courts have said you do it. They should have done it before. Let's make it happen.
He makes an important point, and I want to ask you about it as well. You've allocated $30 million to cover it as much as you can. My understanding is that means folks will get about 30% of those benefits, and that's only going to last for a certain amount of time. What happens after that?
Well, I want to do the first part of your question. No state can replicate the federal responsibility here, all right? So it's not only criminal, it's immoral. This is what the federal government did to special education, and this is why so many states struggle there, including mine. So our intention was at least 30% of the benefit on those EBT cards for 10 days. If he can't load the EBT cards based on this court order, or he appeals, immoral, criminal, never been done before. We always feed Americans. Frankly, I don't understand why Congress isn't forcing the executive without a court order to do their job here, irrespective of a government shutdown.
Well, there you have it. That was a New Mexico governor and the Wisconsin governor speaking earlier with David Gura down at COP30 in Brazil. We should note that, too, we have heard just later today, the Trump administration says food aid will partially be funded. The Trump administration will comply, Carol, with a court order to fund a U.S. food aid benefit for November, but only at 50% of the amount that eligible households normally receive.
You know, David, I was just thinking about, the governors around this country dealing with global issues, dealing with domestic issues. They are seeing what's happening, on the ground with their constituents. They got to feel pressured at this point.
A huge amount of pressure. So I look at New Mexico. Governor Lujan Grisham presides over a state where more than 20% of New Mexicans are on food stamps, really rely on these benefits. And as we were talking about there, that the pressure is real. She's doing what she can to reallocate money so that they can have some fraction of them. But they talked about that court decision. Tim just talked about it as well. 2 judges saying the federal government has to move money around to allow SNAP benefits to continue being doled out to Americans across the country. There was so much ambiguity surrounding that. You had states like these 2 really trying to find a way to make this work. But the pressure is real in the context of this in so many other things. And again, the government shutdown that we're in at the federal level is only compounding that pressure that these governors feel. And again, I think that the message that they wanted to convey is they have a lot of power on their own. They have a lot of power working together. And to pick up on what you said a few minutes ago, Carol, governors can get things done quickly when they need to. Both of them emphasized to me, yes, they deal with high-level macro policy, but governors, local leaders also have to fill those potholes. They have to do things that Americans need done on a very short order.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, David, thank you so much. Super appreciated. David Gura, Bloomberg News correspondent, host of the Bloomberg Big Take president. He is there on location in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, there for the COP30 Bloomberg Philanthropies Summit. And we will continue to monitor David doing more interviews over the next few days. So we will, of course, bring them to you. And you can find them on the Bloomberg and at Bloomberg.com. All right, coming up next, folks, we're going to get into the president. President Trump going face-to-face, a lengthy interview, lots of topics on 60 Minutes last night. We're going to get into that. We're also going to get into his tariffs facing a Supreme Court fight. This is a key component of his strategy, policy, and administration. So much to come. It's a busy Monday. Carol Massar, Tim Stanovic, and this is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. First trading day of the new month. We have got the Dow Jones Industrial Average lower. S&P, NASDAQ, they are both gaining. The start of traditionally solid month on Wall Street sees tech stocks rallying as Amazon's $38 billion deal with OpenAI adds fuel to the AI trade. S&P right now up 13, up by about 0.2% at 68.53. The Dow is down 177. Dow Industrials down down 0.4%, while NASDAQ higher now by 0.5%. Our Mag 7 index is surging by 1.2%. 10-year yield 4.11% with a 2-year 3.60%. Gold up $2.50 the ounce to $4,005, up under 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.1%, 61.06 the barrel on WTI. Bitcoin down 2.7%, just above $107,000. Disney's asking Alphabet's YouTube TV to restore the broadcast of its ABC network for election night as a fight over distribution fees drags on. Right now we got Disney down 0.4%. Alphabet shares up by 0.5%. Again, recapping, S&P holding on to a 14-point gain, up 0.2%. Palantir after the close of trading, Palantir up by 2.8%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Massar, Tim Stenovic, live here at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City. Right now, though, our eyes are on the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. That's where we see the Fed's Lisa Cook answering questions after a speech at Brookings Institution event. And we should point out that this event is marking Lisa Cook's first public speech since President Trump moved back in August to fire her from the Fed Board of Governors over mortgage fraud allegations and her ensuing lawsuit to block the removal. That case has made its way, Tim, to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the Supreme Court with the arguments in January. The justices rejected President Trump's request to immediately remove her. Well, it proceeds. Lisa Cook, for her part, saying, quote, on the allegations and on the lawsuit, quote, many people have reached out. I am grateful. My briefs have laid out my position. Because ongoing legal case, it would be inappropriate to comment further on it, but the opportunity of a lifetime to serve on the Fed.
Also talking about the economy, and Lisa Cook saying that she sees the risk of further labor market weakness as greater than the risk that inflation will pick up, but stops short of endorsing another interest rate cut next month. It just gets more and more interesting when it comes to Fed policy. All right, we're keeping an eye on that. We'll look for any more headlines. In the meantime, President Trump also on our mind following his interview on 60 Minutes last night. President covering a bunch of topics, including testing of U.S. nuclear weapons, the president's pardoning of crypto's CZ, U.S.-China trade talks, Venezuela, the Middle East, and even, Tim, a third term.
The president also mentioned tapping a law that is more than a century old, if necessary, to send U.S. troops into U.S. cities.
If you had to send in the Army or if you had to send in the Marines, I'd do that in a heartbeat. You know, you have a thing called the Insurrection Act. You know that, right? Do you know that I could use that immediately, and no judge can even challenge you on that. But I haven't chosen to do it because I haven't felt we need it.
So you're going to send the military into American cities?
Well, if I wanted to, I could.
That was President Trump on 60 Minutes last night with Norah O'Donnell. Here to talk about the conversation, what was newsworthy, what we should kind of take away from that conversation, the one and only Joe Mathieu. He's here in New York City, usually in the nation's capital. He's co-host of Bloomberg Balance of Power. Joe, there was a lot in that conversation, including they talked about SNAP benefits, and we know we got a headline on that today.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal here. It's day 34 of the government shutdown, and what happened over the weekend was the expiration of funding for SNAP. These are food stamps. We call it SNAP now. That's the program that food stamps fall under. It's not a complete funding of the program. It's a partial funding, but it comes after a couple of judges last week, one in Rhode Island, one in Massachusetts, compelled the administration to do this. They had until noon today to respond. They waited till the very last minute. And so, yes, some of the program will be funded. The idea here, though, is that it's kind of removing another pain point and maybe removing another reason to end this shutdown.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about. If we think about things that could compel Democrats and Republicans to come together and actually get the government open again, if we think back to the president's first term and that 2019 shutdown, what was it? Air traffic controllers, concerns about traveling that actually got the two sides to come together. I think a lot of people thought it could be SNAP that gets the two sides to come together. Not looking like it?
Well, it still could be. It just depends how long the shutdown goes. Remembering that the continuing resolution that was passed weeks and weeks ago ends on November 21st now. So even if we reopened tomorrow, if Democrats all came crashing back into town and voted in the Senate, we'd still be heading for another shutdown before Thanksgiving. So they're going to have to rewrite that CR. And just because they're fulfilling this, $5 billion can go pretty quickly. It just depends on how long the shutdown lasts. We could be talking about another lapse.
That's what happens when 1 in 8 Americans get that benefit.
That's
you
right.
know what was interesting, Joe? And I bring this up because you've covered politics for a long time. And I was thinking about this Halloween party that was at Mar-a-Lago. It was a theme of The Great Gatsby. And there are images all over social media. Is it important to point out this party while there were many millions, tens of millions of Americans that were possibly not going to be able to put food on their table?
Yeah.
That stark contrast of the haves and have-nots.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're seeing that a lot. Look, the optics are everything here, and it also follows, of course, the complete demolition of the East Wing and the construction of a $300 million ballroom. You know, will people remember this a year down the road when the government's back open and we're on with our lives here? I don't know, but it's clearly something that Democrats are consumed with, and they're beating the drum on this now because it's pretty difficult to remove the two. I think the tagline on that party was, "A little party never hurt anyone." And if you lost your SNAP benefits last week, or you're a furloughed federal worker who's not been paid, you might not agree.
Joe, you're here in New York for special election coverage. Tomorrow, Election Day. Big races in Virginia, here in New York City, in the mayoral race, a governor race in New Jersey as well. Is President Trump on the ballot?
Well, that's a great question. He's not acting like he is. We had a Chitterelli endorsement via Truth Social, and he's only doing these tele-rallies tonight. His schedule is basically open for the day, so a lot of folks have wondered why he hasn't leaned in more in these races. Maybe the most he's had to say about is the New York mayoral race, and he tacitly endorsed Andrew Cuomo last night, so I'm not sure that changes anything, guys.
He also said he was more handsome than Mr. Mamdani. But you got to check out the interview for that. Hey, just last question. What do you think was most important in that interview last night?
I have to admit, it was probably that. For at least me, that was a fascinating moment, hearing him make the case as a Republican president of the United States, essentially endorsing a Democratic icon, love him or hate him.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot of what he said before, but just broadly, guys, the fact that he was sitting down on CBS a year after suing this company and completely reshaping the way that newsroom and that organization works was probably the most interesting and wild thing to consider as they were talking.
Yeah, pretty fascinating. Hey, listen, thank you so much. I know it's a busy week for you, but good to get some time right here in studio. Joe Mathieu, co-host of Bloomberg Balance of Power. Catch the PM version of BOP that's coming your way at 5 p.m. Wall Street time to wrap up the day in politics.
Hey, now to another big issue facing a key part of President Trump's agenda, and that, yes, is tariffs. And in some ways, it's a David and Goliath story. The owner of educational toy business is challenging President Trump's tariffs at the U.S. Supreme Court, Carol, citing the impact on his educational toy business, including the Bubble Plush Yoga Ball Buddies.
We've been talking about this a lot today. It's a great story. It's among our most read. Let's get to this. The nation's highest court begins looking at this case on Wednesday. We head to the D.C. Capitol and our news bureau there, and Greg Stohr, he's Bloomberg News Supreme Court reporter. Greg, tell us, great story. Tell us about Rick Waldenberg and his challenge to the president's tariffs.
Yeah, he is just the head of two connected educational toy businesses outside Chicago. It's family-owned business, stem from companies founded by his father and his mother. And they make most of their products overseas in China. And so these tariffs hit them pretty hard, and they hit them even harder because as they tried to shift around their production lines, they sometimes did a bad job of guessing where the next tariffs would be imposed. And he was fed up enough that he decided to sue, and his is one of the cases that made its way up to the Supreme Court.
So in terms of this actually having an effect on the president's agenda, could this just completely reshape the implementation of tariffs?
Oh, absolutely, Tim. Now, let me first say that there are other authorities that the administration has used, and the president and the administration has said they'll use even more to impose tariffs without regard to what happens at the Supreme Court. But at the Supreme Court, it's about this law that gives the president some emergency powers to do certain things to protect the economy. And that law is what the president has used for about 60% of the tariffs that are in place right now. If the Supreme Court says that law does not authorize the president to impose tariffs, that would knock those tariffs out. It could open the way for upwards of $100 billion in refunds, and it would certainly make it much harder for the president to use tariffs as his sort of favorite cudgel to try to get trading partners to do what he wants.
How difficult a case is this for the Supreme Court to figure out?
It's not really that difficult. It's the kind of case they deal with all the time. It's really at its core a question about this statute and some words in the statute and what they mean. Now, this statute authorizes the president, gives him certain powers, but it doesn't mention tariffs. The thing it does say is that the president may regulate importation. And at the core of the case, it's really about whether those words mean that the president can impose tariffs, at least the kind of sweeping tariffs that we're looking at here. So it is a familiar type of case for them. It is perhaps one that they're considering on a faster track than they normally do, but it's really kind of a quintessential Supreme Court issue.
I mean, look, you cover the legal side of this, you cover the Supreme Court side of this, but I can't ignore the sum exceeding $100 billion potentially. That's a real fiscal issue for the United States, Greg.
Yeah, it's both a fiscal issue for the United States and, you know, it would be a relief to the businesses, the American businesses who have been paying these tariffs the whole time. And it could have some spillover effect on inflation. You know, so Rick Woldenberg, the CEO of this company, when I was up there, said that they have tried to hold their prices down, but they've raised them in the middle single digits. And, you know, that inflationary pressure will still be there with these tariffs. And if the Supreme Court rules against Trump, there will be a little less inflationary pressure.
Is that likely, Greg, that they're going to rule against this president?
It is certainly possible, Carol. I'm not sure I want to put odds on it. We have, of course, seen the court side with Trump over and over and over again on preliminary matters, on temporary questions of can he do a certain thing while litigation goes forward. This is the first time they've actually considered whether, at the core, he has the power to do something. Keep in mind that there are some precedents out there during the Biden years where they, on several occasions, said, no, Joe Biden cannot, for example, forgive a whole bunch of student loans, billions of dollars in student loans. And they sort of restricted the power of the president to take general statutory language to do very, very big things. And those precedents may come into play and give the opponents of the tariffs an edge.
Yeah, I feel like we're constantly talking about presidential power here. Hey, 30 seconds, if I may. Lisa Cook of the Fed, she's making some comments she addressed about people reaching out, and she's grateful for that, but doesn't want to comment on the case. That case, her case, goes before the Supreme Court in January. And we know that the president tried to remove her. Just very quickly, 25 seconds. Any idea how that might play out?
Well, we'll get a big clue next month in December when they consider another case that has to do with the president's ability under the Constitution to fire other people, like the Democratic commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission in that case. It's not exactly the same issue, but it's closely connected. The Supreme Court has previously suggested it wants to preserve Fed independence, so that may play a factor there.
You're amazing. Covered it all. Greg Stohr, Supreme Court reporter at Bloomberg News, man. That was a lot. Thank you. Thank you. We so appreciate it. Check out all of his reporting. You can find it on the Bloomberg.
It's 2:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got the Dow lower, the S&P, NASDAQ. They are both advancing, and Palantir coming up after the close of trading ahead of earnings. Palantir shares, they're gaining 2.9%. S&P right now up 13, gain there of 0.2%. NASDAQ part of a broader tech rally, up 111 right now, up 0.5%. The NASDAQ 100 index up 0.4, but the Russell 2000 index of small cap shares down now 0.3%. Our Mag 7 index up 1.2%, and again the Dow lower by 0.4%, down 187. 10-year 4.10% with the 2-year 3.60%. Gold flat on the day, 4,002 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude little changed, up about 0.1%, 61.04 a barrel. And Bitcoin now lower by 2.4%, 107,336 on the Bitcoin. Eaton is buying liquid cooling specialist Boyd Thermal for $9.5 billion to capitalize on heavy demand relating to AI AI data centers. Shares of Eaton right now, they're up by 1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right. I know Charlie Pellet likes to fly and go places. I'm not sure if he's ready for this.
Charlie would be in one of these in an instant.
Like that.
Absolutely.
Well, Bloomberg has been reporting on the idea of flying cars. Apparently, they've been around for, I think, over a century.
Yeah, have you seen the Jetsons, man?
I love the
Come on.
Jetsons.
We were promised flying cars.
Daughter Judy.
Yeah.
Jane, his wife. The technology, though, may be finally catching up with the first generation of eVTOLs already taking flight. The industry already worth $1 billion, potential market size of $1 trillion by 2040. That, Tim, is according to Morgan Stanley.
Okay, despite the potential, the sector's still risky for investors due to regulatory, operating, and safety certifications, as well as training and infrastructure questions. Our next guest, a player in the industry, the company reporting earnings later this week. Adam Goldstein is founder and CEO of Archer Aviation. It's the $6.7 billion market cap aerospace company that trades under the ticker ACHR. He joins us from San Jose, California. Archer designing and developing electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, eVTOLs, for use in urban air mobility networks. When are Carol and I going to take one of these to Newark Airport? We're flying out tomorrow. We're both taking cabs.
Well, it's great to be here. The industry is actually, as you said, it's been around for a while and it's getting pretty mature. So the good news is that in June of this year, President Trump issued an executive order that'll mandate really the speed of these being brought to market. So by next June, you should expect to be seeing these aircrafts flying in and around the big urban cities. 5 cities are getting announced. They'll be announced in January. They'll be flying in June. And so that's when you'll start to see them flying around in the U.S.
Flying in June without passengers?
They'll start piloted with just no passengers.
Okay.
And the goal is to ramp operations there through the certification program.
So go back to my original question, which is really when we will be using these as easily as we can hail a cab using Uber or Lyft.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's really, the company's job to build the safe airplanes and then the FAA's job to certify. So our hope is soon after that period of time when we're showing that these aircrafts are safe, we're showing that there's a really good consumer experience. And overall, we've gotten a lot of, buy-in from community acceptance.
Are you having active conversations with the FAA right now?
Yes, so there's constantly active conversations. Of course, the government shutdown, kind of created some slowdowns with that. But the conversations continue, and it's been ongoing for a very long time. We have longstanding relationships there, and the programs are very, very well established. This is a priority of the administration. That's what the executive order in June was all about. And so this is one of those programs that I think does get a lot more attention. We kind of punch above our weight as an industry. And so, they've been very good to us so far.
So what is your definition, Adam, of commercial operations, and exactly when do they start, meaning revenue generating passenger flights? I just want to clarify.
So Archer has 2 sides of the business. We have a civil business, which is moving around, and a defense side of the business. On the civil side of the business, we have a 2-pronged approach. There's an international strategy and a domestic strategy. On the international side, we've been working very closely with the UAE and the UAE government. And specifically, the largest helicopter operator in the Middle East is called Abu Dhabi Aviation, which we've partnered with and has acquired aircraft. So we've already started to receive dollars from that. We'll start to recognize revenue first quarter of next year. And so that's when you'll start to see some of those numbers come in. It'll be very small, though, to start, and then we'll ramp that over time. On the defense side of things, the contracts have to be announced. And so that still hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of talk, and I think the programs are starting to, firm up, and there's a lot of excitement around new, what they call autonomous and attritable aircraft. But those programs have yet to be announced. We're hopeful that those will be announced soon.
So my understanding, too, going back to the stuff you're doing in Abu Dhabi, so that launch was the first, correct, of your company's launch edition program, and was supposed to be kind of the playbook for Ethiopian Airlines and in Indonesia. So lessons learned so far, and how is it, among those lessons being learned, changing the future rollout?
Yeah, those are great questions. Launching in the UAE, or really just the broader GCC, has provided a lot of lessons around weather. And so, of course, it's very hot there. There's a lot of kind of harsh conditions with a lot of sand in the air. So we've learned a lot about how to keep these aircrafts cool in very, very hot weather, not just the interiors for consumers, but actually like the safety of the aircraft. So that testing, I think, has been hugely helpful. And so you start in one of the harsher environments. You can work our way to some of the more mild environments like here in California. And so that's provided a lot of the sort of base layer lessons for operating in really difficult conditions. But the goal is really to just continue to get reps, learn, figure out how these aircrafts will get to market. The good news is they're all based around safety. And so multiple sets of propellers providing multiple sets of redundancy. And so I think we can deliver a really high quality, safe product.
From an infrastructure perspective, Carol mentioned that we have to have infrastructure in the right place. I'm wondering if there are cities in the U.S. that work right now or do not work for this type of technology.
Yeah, well, I've had my sights set on Los Angeles as sort of the best city, I think, in the U.S. for this platform. There's so much traffic in Los Angeles. There are over 5 million daily trips that take greater than an hour by car going less than 20 miles in Los Angeles. So an incredible city to offer this type of platform. So last year we announced the LA network, which really started to show the different points of interest. So partnerships with SoFi Stadium, with Woodland Hills, with USC Coliseum. So places where there already is existing infrastructure, heliports that are there. And we'll start building that network up. Of course, we have the Olympics coming in Los Angeles in 2028, where we're going to be increasing the infrastructure that gets built in and around the games. And Archer was announced as the exclusive air taxi provider for that event. So Los Angeles is a perfect city to go launch this. But of course, there's other great cities like New York, Miami, and San Francisco that I think will be also great places for us to launch. But pretty much anywhere they use helicopters will be great for this product.
So exclusive air taxi partner for the Olympics out in Los Angeles. So that means you're going to actually be flying folks around?
That is certainly the goal. So the goal is to move VIPs, dignitaries, fans in and around the games. We have been partnering very closely with LA28 to do that. I'm confident in that goal. We'll be able to get there. It's a super exciting time for the industry. That's actually a goal that was set out by the FAA back in 2022. So they coined the term Innovate 28, which was the first city where you'll see these aircraft used in mass will be at the LA28 games. So that's an alignment that the goals were put out there a while ago, and we hope to deliver against that.
Do you feel at all that investors, though, are feeling a little bit of fatigue from kind of the repeated delays in the start of revenue-generating passenger flights? I mean, the stock's up about 7% year to date, but you look at the chart over the last year, it's like a rough EKG. It's a little tricky. So I'm just wondering, are you feeling like investors, I think it was back in 2021 that you guys slated the launch of a taxi launch service in Miami and LA by 2024. So I get it. You want to get it right. You want it to be safe. But do you feel like your investors are getting a little antsy? Just got about 30 seconds. Then we're going to take a break and come back and talk a little bit more.
I would say it's actually quite the contrary. And that's not just an Archer statement. I think that's an industry statement. So one of our peers and one of my good friends, Kyle Clark, is IPOing his company called Beta. Here, I think it's supposed to price this week. And from what I've heard is the thing is massively oversubscribed. There's tons of demand. So I think there is a ton of interest in the eVTOL space. I think the investors are very excited about the progress that we have. And I think that'll continue to pay off.
Hey, sit tight, Adam. We're going to come back, continue with you for a few more minutes. Adam Goldstein, founder and CEO of Archer Aviation. Ticker is ACHR. As we mentioned, the stock slightly higher here in 2025. We're going to go back to San Jose, California when we come back. Also, some stocks on the move. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, folks, we want to get back to Adam Goldstein. He's founder, CEO of Archer Aviation, still with us from San Jose, California. We are talking about eVTOLs. Hey, one thing I want to know, Adam, is progress on pilot certification. Where are you guys on that?
So the certification process is a long one, and this is actually the first new category in a very long time. First new category in 60 years at the FAA. So it's a new process really for everybody. And there's two sides. You have to figure out the rules, which they call policy, and then mix that against the execution. So showing that the aircrafts are safe against that policy. So we're deep into the policy side, nearly done with that, and then starting to work on the execution side of that as well. So the goal is to grind through that. But what I think the better proof points, rather than trying to understand this kind of black box certification process, will be the executive order from President Trump, where we'll start to see these aircrafts flying next summer in and around these cities. That's really the point where we can help gain the consumer confidence, consumer awareness of what we're doing, and ultimately showcase these aircrafts are safe in and around urban environments.
Adam, we're in a world where we're trying to remove humans from the equation, whether they're Uber or Lyft drivers with Waymo and Tesla's cybercabs, or with other elements in warehouses with robots and Amazon. Do you envision a future where Archer does not have pilots?
Well, we are deep also in the autonomy process in aviation as well. There are lots of autonomous solutions that exist. In fact, we've flown the aircrafts autonomously many times. That being said, I think the difficulty in aviation is in and around the regulation and in and around how the aircrafts will operate with the existing environments. So how will air traffic control communicate with these aircrafts if they're autonomous? How will they land with the given infrastructure? So I do think we will get there. I think they will start out piloted and then work their way into the autonomy stack. I do think it's new companies like Archer that will actually invent those autonomy stacks and really try to create the network that's necessary to deploy autonomous aircrafts, but still more to come on that.
All right. And look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Adam, thanks so much. Adam Goldstein, founder and CEO of Archer Aviation.
I'm Tim Stanovic along with Carol Masser. Let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. With us is Bloomberg News equities reporter Alexandra Semenova. Alex, Cisco Systems, one you're watching today.
Yeah, a lot of tech news today, but I found this one particularly interesting. Cisco is announcing a new all-in-one product to help retail stores, healthcare facilities, and factories incorporate artificial intelligence with the use of a single rack of equipment. This technology is called Unified Edge. I'm looking at the stock right now. It's up about 1.7% on this news. Basically, this new technology combines chip storage, networking, and security software and relies on Cisco products for this. But it lets customers actually choose their own chips, so they can go with Nvidia or Intel here. Right now, basically most companies are focused on training AI models or running them, but Cisco and other companies are betting that businesses will need equipment to run AI tasks locally, and they won't have the skilled workers on site to help them. So this Cisco product is designed to be plugged in, and it just can remotely be watched by centralized corporate technicians. And apparently Verizon is already using it.
It's really fascinating to see these tech companies kind of figuring out where their place is in the AI world. I should also point out that I think UBS upgraded Cisco today, that on reflecting a multi-year growth cycle driven by AI infrastructure demand. I mean, price target hiked to 88 from 74. So it's just, again, I feel like the spend, right? It's just,
you have to spend, you have to have some sort of plan. And at this point, Wall Street is just rewarding this.
It is pretty wild. Oh, next one?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready.
You want to go to Disney?
Let's go to Disney.
Let's go to Disney.
A little bit of drama with Disney. Apparently, Disney asked YouTube to restore the broadcast of its ABC network ahead of Election Day. They're having a fight over distribution fees, so subscribers to YouTube TV have lost their access to Disney channels like ABC, ESPN, and FX on October 31st after the two companies basically failed to come to an agreement around their new programming costs. Both sides have accused each other of being unreasonable in their demands. YouTube actually offered some customers a $20 a month credit if this fight continues. And of course, Election Day is coming up tomorrow. It includes a race here for mayor in New York City, as well as a governor's race in Virginia and New Jersey. So it's trying to get people access to what's going to be
Remember
happening.
when it was free on the airwaves?
What a different world.
Remember when we just turned on our TV and we had all our channels, and now it's like one streaming service after the other, or do you go to YouTube, or what do you use at this point?
This is the choice we all demanded. This is what we all wanted.
Is it really?
And here's what we got.
I don't know about that. Let's talk about Pfizer. What's going on there?
Last one. Some fighting with Pfizer. Also, I guess everyone is a little bit
kind of
worked up today. It's definitely Monday sentiments, but it accused Novo Nordisk of trying to stifle competition in the weight loss market by attempting to acquire the obesity startup Metsera Inc. This is the second lawsuit that it has filed in 4 days as Pfizer tries to retain its grip on a deal that Novo upended last week. Apparently, apparently in a statement they said that they're trying to stop Novo Nordisk from illegally paying off Metsera and its controlling stockholders to gain control of, impair, and potentially kill an emerging U.S. competitor. God, quite a statement there.
Listen, it's all about those GLP-1 drugs. I think I saw something too that said finally, I think obesity, at least by one measure, maybe finally going down in America.
What's fascinating is I feel like the big tech companies are working together, but when it comes to GLP-1s, we just keep hearing news about these companies fighting with each other.
They really are. All right, Alex, thank you so much. Check out our Stock Movers podcast. Find it on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcast. The close coming your way on TV. We continue on radio.